Back when I was a kid, one of the most exciting things about going to arcades for me wasn't just trying out different fighters or beat 'em up games, but it was trying out different light gun games. And games like Time Crisis, Point Blank were staples of games that I went to at the arcades. However, one that was special to me in particular was House of the Dead 2. And my obsession with that game grew even deeper because I had a copy of it on my Dreamcast, but I didn't have a light gun, so I was always excited to go back and play it whenever I'd attend an arcade that actually had that game on display. And as I've gotten older, one of my dream cabinets was the idea of having a House of the Dead 2 cab, and I don't think Arcade 1-Up is going to be releasing anything like that anytime soon. So I went ahead and converted my old broken down Street Fighter 2 cabinet into a House of the Dead cabinet. And as it stands, it's become one of my most played units purely because House of the Dead 2 to me is just such a great game. And in this video, I'm going to go over why I think that's such a special light gun shooter and why I go back to it continuously throughout the years. So let's take a look. When House of the Dead 2 came out, I would have been pretty young. But I remember playing it for the first time in an arcade. I believe it was a Palladium way back when. And being immediately interested in the game and really enjoying the world that it brought. I liked the environments, but more importantly, I liked the way it felt shooting different enemies. I liked that when you hit a zombie in the arm, you'll see his arm blow off or parts of his head get blown off. It might sound trivial, but at that time, there weren't really many light gun shooters that were doing that. For the most part, the screen would just kind of flash and an enemy would fall over and disappear. But in House of the Dead 2, that wasn't the case. You'd see pieces of the zombie fly off, and at that time, visually, it looked really good. The other thing as well is the guns felt good to use. I felt like because of the gore, I guess, that the guns felt like they had a lot of impact and they felt like they did a lot of damage when you were shooting at enemies. I also liked the enemy variants. You had different enemies who, certain parts of their bodies you couldn't hit unless they, for example, the axe zombie threw his axe and you'd have to shoot him and then try to shoot the axe before it hit you. Little touches like that, to me, made this game feel special at the time. It felt different than any other on-rail shooter that I had played. And they evolved that as well with the boss fights and having different critical hit areas that you had to hit the bosses with that I felt like weren't cheap, but they felt fair, but they also felt like you had to play strategically. Now, the other thing that I also really appreciated about House of the Dead 2 was the game itself has great different branching paths that you can go through, and a bunch that, to be honest, I almost forgot about until I started replaying through it recently. And it makes playing through this arcade shooter just seem a lot more fresh each time I've gone through. And of course, I know there was at one point a bunch of jokes about this, but there's also the B-movie aesthetic of this game that I think just works fantastic for the style of game that it is. And, you have the really cheesy dialogue and almost over-the-top ridiculous storyline, but for this world and this style of game, it works really, really well. And I think that that's part of the charm and part of the nostalgia that I have for this game. It felt unique in its era, and it feels to this day still quite unique. I haven't really touched any of the new House of the Dead, so I'm unsure how the series progressed, but for me, House of the Dead 2 is a staple of not just my childhood, but probably one of the best games and best light gun games that I've ever played. And pretty much at this point, I'd argue that I'll continue playing this game until I'm old and gray. And to me, I think there's something special about that. I think there's something special about the accessibility to House of the Dead 2, but also the skill curve that it has and the variants and enemies that it has that not a lot of light gun shooters that I've played really felt like they did in a good way. So let me know what you guys think. I know this game is near and dear to a lot of people's hearts. And hey, hopefully one day we'll see Arcade 1-Up come out with their version of it, some of their units.